What's going on, guys? It's Mohammed, the host of Aware Alpha, and welcome to episode 89 or 90. I'm not exactly sure which episode this will be. I just want to say I am super grateful for everything that's happening in my life, everything that's happening with this podcast, and I'm super grateful for all the listeners listening to this podcast, taking the information and implementing it in their day-to-day life, taking stuff from it and lessons from it and actually doing something about the information. So they're not just listening to the podcast for entertainment purposes, but they're actually taking stuff away from it, from the listeners, from the guests, and they are implementing it in their day-to-day life. And I love hearing that. I love getting the feedback to Instagram, Facebook, and everywhere that listeners find me and the guests that I bring onto the show. Today, we have another special guest from all the way other side of the world. It's actually Thursday there and it's Wednesday here. Am I right?
Yeah, it is. It's Thursday morning here.
So it's interesting. Today's guest, he's actually an ex-IDF officer and a boxing coach, and also a Krav Maga expert, which we're gonna ask him what that is here soon. So welcome to the Aware Alpha podcast, Sar.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Mo. Pleasure all mine.
No problem.
It's a chilly morning here in Sydney, Australia, Thursday morning. And it's nice to be on the podcast.
That's awesome, man. Does it snow there? I'm curious.
It snows not where I am at. I'm in Sydney and more specifically around the eastern suburbs in Bondi, but it does snow around here. A few hours drive from here, there's Perishers, there's Thredbo, which are mountains where it snows and people go here to ski and snowboard. You can get everything around here in Australia. It's such a big country, big land.
Yeah. And also the deserts and the hot places.
The desert, you have everything. It's a giant island.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things because I have a lot of friends there. So I'm curious to know, what is an IDF officer, and then what is Krav Maga? Like, I'm curious what those two things are. Yeah.
So the IDF is the Israeli Defense Force. It's Israel's defense forces. That's the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. Okay. I was an officer in the Air Force intelligence for most of my service. And that's also where I've learned Krav Maga and eventually started teaching Krav Maga. Krav Maga directly translates from Hebrew to contact combat, and it's the official martial art of Israel. It's a martial art that has quite a long history that's intertwined with the development of the Israeli defense forces. And it's a self-defense system that tries to be as practical and as simple as possible. It tries to equip people from all walks of life with very efficient and simple tools that can improve their chances of dealing with physical violence if it arises. And it even goes deeper into equipping them with tools of how to avoid that. So building confidence and awareness and presence in situations. In these days, a lot of marketing around it pushes it as like the deadliest martial art out there. It's quite bullshit in my eyes, but it is very efficient. We try and always employ the most efficient tool we have to the most sensitive target the attacker might have. For example, one of the key images of Krav Maga is kicking to the groin, which is very, very unhonorable in many martial arts and stuff. But in Krav Maga, we say, if someone attacks me and violates my safety and my well-being, there is no honor anymore. We will do whatever it takes to basically regain control over our situation. So that's Krav Maga. I was an officer in the Israeli Air Force. In Israel, Army service is mandatory. 3 years are mandatory, but because I was an officer, I spent 5 years in there. And that's also part in teaching self-defense, and Krav Maga was part of my service as well.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
What made you get into what made you get into the, I guess it would be the same thing as like the army here in Canada, or
so in Israel there isn't as clear a separation between Army, Navy, Air Force as there is in certain other countries. For example, in Canada or the US, you actually choose to draft to the Navy, to something like that in a way. But in Israel, it's one army. Everything is army, And then the army has its sects of Navy, Air Force, and land forces. I didn't choose where I went. In Israel, you'd go through tests and exams and sort of a procedure that basically puts you into where you are most needed, and in some aspects also where you want to be. And I found myself in the Air Force. It was my own journey there.
Interesting. Yeah. How long? So you said 5 years you're training, or so was that your whole time there, or 5 years?
So usually there's a few months of training, and then you get deployed, and then there's more training, and you deployed somewhere else. It depends on your, you can almost say, career path in the army. For me, I spent a few months training, then got deployed into the Air Force Intelligence, and there I grew as a soldier until I got offered to become an officer. So unlike many other armies around the world where you draft to be an officer, you go to officer academy. In Israel, you begin as a soldier, and if you are qualified, then you get offered to go to officer's course, under the notion that leaders should know what they're leading and who they're leading, and know the experiences the people who they lead are going through. You know, if you're an officer who never spent time as a soldier, it might be hard to connect to what your soldiers are feeling and how they're acting in it. So all Israeli officers start as soldiers, so they know exactly what everyone is going through under that notion and value system. Yes, I was offered. Yeah, I was offered to become an officer. I took that opportunity because I believed in the importance of it, and I wanted to grow in the ways that the army offered me to grow. And went on that journey, which lasted almost 5 years. Yeah,
that's amazing. 12 years.
5 years. 5.
Oh, 5 years. Yes. So, did you actually ever go to war? Like, did you ever like?
Israel is very, very unique in the essence of the trouble we have and the conflicts we have. In regards that it's not a country versus a country as much. You know, we don't go to war. The army deploys into a country. We have constant conflict on our border. We have a lot of we sometimes use the word enemies, but I don't like to use that. We have a lot of issues with our surrounding countries. So there's a lot of friction in the borders. And of course, we have a lot of conflict with current residents or people we share the land with, which is the Palestinians. So there's a lot of conflict around that. So instead of specifically wars, there's more operations where you get deployed quite close to where you serve and deal with situations. What's quite unique in Israel is the majority of your service, you're only a few hours, sometimes less drive from your home, because Israel is so small. So now I did some guard duty, and on the weekend, my mom would come and bring me food. That's how, so it's quite easy for us as Israeli soldiers or officers to know who we're protecting, because my mom is here. I'm protecting my mom, right? So it's very different than, for example, Australian soldiers who sometimes get deployed, you know, in Afghanistan, which is like a 14-hour flight away, and it's a very different situation, mentally, emotionally, in many ways. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so my pleasure.
I'm curious, like, because 5 years is a lot, because like, I've been looking into like getting into like jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or boxing, just one of them. Like I've been working out and I'm very healthy, but what I want to do now is I want to learn self-defense. Like I just want to, I'm not trying to be like a black belt in anything. I just want to learn some concepts to, if you know, if I'm ever in trouble in a place, that I can defend myself, right?
Well, and that's exactly what Krav Maga gets to. That's exactly Krav Maga. Yeah, that's
awesome. Because I was looking into some stuff. Like I was reading like what's jiu-jitsu and what's Muay Thai or what's kickboxing, and that's how I ran into Krav Maga. Like literally 2 days before I messaged you on Instagram to do on Instagram, like I was reading about it. And I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. But I don't know if anywhere, like I live in like a pretty small town. So I don't know if there is like a kickboxing club, there is like a Muay Thai, and there's a jiu-jitsu, but there isn't anything else. Like, I don't think there's a Krav Maga experts or a class or sessions here, right? So what I'm curious to hear from you is, so what would you say is the difference between Krav Maga and jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and kickboxing?
First, I'll say that the main difference is the goal. right? These days, when you train jiu-jitsu, in a way, the goal is competition. It's become a combat sport.
Yeah.
And as such, how you train, the environment you train, and the type of pressure you go through is relevant to the sport industry, to winning the competition. Same with boxing, same with Muay Thai. Krav Maga's orientation is around protecting ourselves from attacks in the street. So it's the nature of the pressure we face and the nature of the training. And then, of course, what you deal with. With jiu-jitsu, your main threat, if you want to win a jiu-jitsu competition, is another practitioner who does jiu-jitsu. So your training is how to beat someone who does jiu-jitsu. In Krav Maga, we try to deal with the randomness of life. So we will touch a lot of subjects. We will touch how to deal with a king hit, how to deal with the buildup of a confrontation and the attempts to de-escalate. We will also deal with some extreme situations, what to do when someone armed with a knife threatens you, or worst case scenario, attacks you with a knife, which is something that isn't dealt in boxing, right? Boxing, you have gloves, you don't have a knife. Krav Maga tries to be as complete as it can in covering these subjects, but reality is crazy. Reality is chaos, and it's randomness, and it's unlimited. So we try and, in some way, I like to use the word statistics a lot. So we try to equip you with the most statistically relevant tools to the most statistically relevant threats. So, for example, here in Australia, we had a lot of problems with king hits, people getting drunk and then punching people out of nowhere. So this is something that we'd focus more in classes here. Maybe in your area, I'd assume, I wouldn't know, but maybe there's higher threats around people using baseball bats to attack people, right? If that's the case, then we would focus more on that. And then we would use natural response, natural reactions, and something that's more probable for you to use and execute to deal with those situations, right? In some ways, combat sports always go for the most efficient way to do something. You need to be the most proficient, a mastery of the skill. So in boxing, you become more subtle with your slips, more efficient with your punches, etc. In Krav Maga, we try to stray a little bit away from efficiency and focus on probability. What is the most likely thing you can do to defend yourself in a real situation? And this is one of Krav Maga's most powerful things in my eyes. Of course, it's very much dependent on the person you train with, on the system you train with, because Krav Maga now is split into so many, little sects like karate, like kung fu, like all of those, even BJJ with like Gracie Barra and all of those. So it's important that you find the right place for yourself to train. I would actually still look for Krav Maga around you if this is interest you. You'd be surprised. You can find Krav Maga in some quite remote places around the world. And what I say to everyone, though, is the most important thing for self-defense, for well-being, is consistency. So even if you find the best teacher and the best gym and the best training, and it doesn't resonate with you, and you will not be consistent with it, and you will not stay there for the journey, then it's not worth anything, right? It's not worth anything. If you enjoy boxing and you will be able to commit to boxing and be consistently in the gym training, you will eventually, over time, be better equipped to defend yourself from violent situations than someone who's doing Krav Maga but has barely attended and is barely trained, right? So find something that resonates.
Consistency is the name of the game. What would you suggest between Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, and kickboxing? Let's say if I can't find a Krav Maga expert here, which one of those would you suggest? Somebody that has fought would be the best one that could teach me self-defense and have me prepared. Kickboxing, boxing.
It's a good question that we always get. It comes under this umbrella that in some way people always won't say, but they think is, what is the best martial art? And the reality is there is no best martial art, right? If you have trained boxing your whole life and now you're in a bar and some drunk guy takes you down, you're in a disadvantage because you've never worked in wrestling or you've never worked on the ground. But if you are a BJJ person and your whole life trained on the floor and suddenly someone punches you, you're in a disadvantage there. What I find though, like I said before, consistently is people who commit and train regularly in any combat sports over time are better equipped to deal with any type of violence than other people. And not necessarily because of the martial art itself, but because of the mindset, the confidence, the fitness, the awareness that comes with it. So what I'd recommend someone that doesn't have access to Krav Maga, to self-defense, is find a place that you feel comfortable and you can train in. Go and do a session at the boxing gym, at the Muay Thai gym, at the BJJ gym. See which resonates with you. If you like the teacher, you like the people, you like the training, that would be the best for you. Because we never know what life will happen, right? Maybe you will find yourself rolling on the floor with someone and then your BJJ training is amazing. But if not, maybe someone there. With that, personally, I view boxing as a very important tool in self-defense because violence between men and to other men is often portrayed, often involves throwing punches.
Standing up too, right?
Standing up, posturing, fawning, punches, etc. So boxing does equip us with a lot of relevant tools around that.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great answer.
My pleasure.
So I'm curious to know, like, for yourself, like anybody that stayed consistent with anything, you know, whether it's meditation, whether it's a business for 5 years, and whether it's a relationship, and then combat sport, I believe it's, you know, something that I look up to anybody that does it, because especially for 5-6 years doing it, and then now you've been doing it for years because you also have a coaching academy and all that stuff like that, right? So what I'm curious is that through your experience these last 5 years with the army, you know, and then also the 5 years of like, well, how long have you been out of the army, and how many more years have you been doing this now?
I've started Krav Maga when I was 18, right? That's what we do in basic training. That's the self-defense tools that we get equipped as soldiers in Israel. And I am now 34. So I've been doing it for almost 16 years since I first got exposed to it. And I've been teaching it probably for 12 years or so, even 13, 14 years now. I have finished my army when I was 23, 5 years. And I actually think my greatest growth in the world of self-defense understanding and violence understanding and hand-to-hand combat understanding actually happened as a civilian, because I had more time to attend classes with other Krav Maga practitioners and teachers and instructors, and I had more free time to develop my skills. In the army, it's not that you're fighting all day. It's not that you're like 16 hours a day fighting. Most of your work is mandatory work. It's mundane work. And as an officer, it's the same. It's called an officer because you stay in the office a lot. You know, you have a lot of work around that. So in reality, my greatest technical growth and mental growth around the understanding of violence happened as a civilian. And especially when I started teaching it more to civilians, because that's when I had to grow into the role, which I was.
No, that's amazing. So what I'm curious is, so during those, you know, these 16 years, what are some life lessons that you have learned from the practice?
That's very interesting. That's a big thing that we work. The thing I found here is that the most important self-defense tool out there is confidence. It's confidence. And in it sit two other very important tools, which is awareness, our ability to recognize where we are, what the situation is, and then also, funnily enough, communication. It's one of the most important self-defense tools. And the confidence, awareness, and communication are relevant for us in every aspect of our lives, whether it's business, relationships, anything, right? The spiritual practices as well. You need to be confident that what you're doing is leading you somewhere in a way.
Keep going. I was going to say, I'm curious. So when you say confidence, what do you exactly mean? Like, so let's say like confidence in your ability that you can do it, or like, I'm curious. Actually.
So confidence is quite a lot and quite a convoluted subject. What is confidence? Sometimes in the world of masculinity of men, we imagine confidence as this strong guy walking around, but that's not confidence. Confidence is the trust in what we feel and what we know and our experience and our intuition, right? And I feel that training gives you confidence to trust that intuition and to trust your instincts and to trust your ability to deal with situations as they arise. And this is the confidence I talk about. And we put people under a lot of pressure in training here. We surprise them. Unexpected situations. You stand sometimes in training with eyes closed and have someone start stabbing you with a rubber knife that imitates a situation, and suddenly you have to react and you have to deal with it. And what you find after years of training is, I can do this. I can deal with surprise attacks, and you become confident in your ability to deal with things that life throws at you. And I find that makes people, by the way, less aggressive. I feel that aggression is a lot of time a defense mechanism that we have in us, or an inability to deal with our emotions or the environment. And when we have this confidence, we become a bit more calm. We become less stressed. We are more able to trust ourselves to deal with whatever life throws at us.
No, that's amazing. That's a great answer. And then when you said communication, what I was thinking about was that our ability to, control the confrontation through words. And, is that what you meant when you said communication?
Yeah, so 100%, 99% of the average attacks that the average practitioner or student that I have will face in their life can be avoided through communication, whether it's de-escalating the situation, whether it's understanding the situation and breaking it or changing the frame of it, whether it's sometimes just calling help, right? Sometimes if I have people coming and I shout help or police, that. And this all sits under communication. Communication can be, oh, hey, buddy, sorry, I'm sorry I insulted you. You are the man, you are the king, whatever you need to feel good, don't attack me. And it can be clearing things, as sometimes I laugh about it and we say, I did not talk to your girlfriend. Sorry, I didn't talk to your girlfriend, and that's enough, right? Because you spoke to my girlfriend. No, I didn't, and that's enough, right? So this is communication. And we actually work a lot on it, right? I don't see it enough in the world of self-defense. Everyone practices punching, elbowing, choking. What about shouting, hey, stay away from me. You're making me feel uncomfortable. Stay back, stay back. And this is a very powerful tool of communication. The minute you learn to communicate your feelings, because these are feelings, stay back. I don't feel comfortable. You learn to communicate your feelings in these situations. You actually find that communicating your feelings in everyday life situations becomes easier as well. Telling your partner, hey, I don't feel comfortable with what you're doing is more accessible to you, because now in training, you just told some big guy running at you, trying to punch you to stay away. You don't make me hit you back or something like that, right?
No,
so that's communication.
No, that's good. So I noticed that, wow, I'm really glad for this conversation, just because it is really, it's bringing a lot of awareness for myself as well. Like you never really think about things, like especially in the midst of a confrontation or something happening, right? So that communication is actually a tool, like being able to communicate your feelings, expressing something like, I didn't talk to you, or I didn't talk to your girlfriend, or step back away from me, or even shouting for help and everything like that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I noticed on your page that you started to meditate probably a while ago. I think it was one of the older posts. When did you get into meditation, and what are your thoughts on meditation, and like what do you what made you get into meditation?
Well, quite a few years ago, I found myself dealing with a lot of stress. A lot of things happened to me in life and thrown me out. And through my whole life, I've heard meditation, meditation, meditation. You hear it all the time, but I never got to it. I don't know if it's trauma or what it is, but I know now a little bit better that it is some types of trauma and some issues. But I had a hard time staying quietly with myself. If I'd sit for 5 minutes quietly, I'd get like a little bit anxious and antsy, and I need to do something and go to my phone and do it, and I was unable. And I tried a few times to meditate, because I know meditation is good for you, but 5 minutes with my eyes closed, I would think that I'm failing, because my head would go everywhere, and I'd quit, right? Because I have this need to succeed, which is again a very masculine trait, and something that society pushes on us. But so I found myself dealing with a lot of stress, and then I found myself having a lot of free time. And I started spending with people who were spending time with people who were meditating regularly. And I actually, who these people were resonated with me quite a lot. And I decided to, okay, maybe I should try and meditate some more. And I started investing a little bit more time and more time. And then I saw a lecture by, I think it was Sam Harris, or a podcast by Sam Harris. And Sam Harris and Dan Harris, and they spoke about how meditation is a muscle. And how actually every time your thoughts go somewhere else and you bring the focus back to your breath is a success. He said that it's like a bicep curl. Every time your brain goes somewhere, you bring it back, that's what strengthens your mind and your mental and your spirit. And that sentence resonated with me because I came from a fitness world. So I know, so this is good. This is actually me thinking of other things and bringing it back. That's good. Wow. And that gave me access to meditation and allowed me to meditate more. And then some guided meditations came and things like that. Today, I'm a big fan and proponent of meditation. It helps us clear our minds, clear the backlog of our brain, helps us connect to our emotions, to our physical body as well, whether it's like, where do I hurt through body scanning, and to how I move. And now I'm in the process of trying for a long time now to bring meditation into my day-to-day life in a way, basically being aware and present and trying to calm down that monkey brain that the Eastern practices talk about so much. Basically try and focus even through the day, be a bit more present, which I think really is the essence of what you should be doing with meditation. Should bring your presence to the moment.
Yeah, meditation is a game changer. I started to meditate 4 or 5 years ago, and then I attended a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
Vipassana.
Amazing. And Vipassana was one of those before and after moments of my life. You know, my whole life transitioned, you know, after that 10 days. And I always say to my students, and I have a meditation program and I have a bunch of meditations, and I always share that, like, it's not what happened in those 10 days. It's how I integrated and processed it like 6 months, a year, 2 years after 10 days, right? And I also, when you were saying about the muscle, I heard something as well, like sitting still in meditation is working out for your mind, just like lifting weights is working out for your physical body, right? So meditation is like you're sitting still. That's literally, you're actually working out your mind. You know what I mean? You're working out your awareness and your memory and all that stuff like that, right? Because every time our higher faculties is like, imagination is a higher faculty, memory is a higher faculty. And so if I'm thinking about the future, which is, you know, I'm actually using my imagination. If I'm thinking about the past, I'm actually using my memory. So the present moment is the only thing that I have. And meditation helps you get into the present moment by, you know, focusing on your breath, all those stuff like that. Interesting question that came to my mind. What would you say is the difference between meditation and combat sports, especially where you practice?
Well, first, they're different, right? Sometimes a lot of time these days, you hear a bit of like the spiritual bros, I call them, those people that got into it, talk about everything is a meditation and everything. That it's not exactly true, right? Like fighting is not exactly meditation. It's quite hard to meditate when someone punches you in the face. But they have a lot of gray areas that are in touch. That is, meditation has a lot of tools that improve your fighting, the awareness, the calmness, the recognition of our emotions when we look at combat sports. And meditation also allows us to deal with self-defense because it makes me more aware of my emotions as they come. So I'm like, whoa, this person is making me feel uncomfortable. And I'm able to recognize and name that emotion because through meditation, I'm able to connect to my emotions. And in some way, you're learning to trust your intuition even more. And it's actually very interesting because in the book, The Gift of Fear, basically they talk about how a lot of victims of violence say that before the violent situation happened, they actually knew something is about to come. So their intuition told them something is coming, whether you look at it in a spiritual and energetical way, or whether in a physical way, where your instincts were picking up on things. So they knew. But if we are not in tune with our emotions, with our body, we are not aware of what's happening, we will never be able to pick up on those fine, subtle tunes, right? And then on the other end, it's always a two-way street. Fighting is a type of body awareness. I'm learning how to move my body, recognize where things are. I'm also learning to move other people's bodies and the environment as well. So I'm getting to connect to a lot of these things. And at the same time, I'm doing it under stress. So I learned to be calm under stress a little bit more, or at least allow my brain to think under stress. And I can bring that into my meditation practice. I can bring that into, I'm still very stressed, I'm still anxious, but I need to sit quietly today. I can deal with this, I can do this, I can deal with these thoughts, because I just trained with some person and I just fought and I got punched in the face and I'm alive and I'm well. So then, you know what, sitting quietly is not that bad. So I can connect those two things. And in some ways, I like to see it as well. You can look at combat sport and training as meditation in movement, right? Moving meditation. I'm conscious and present about my arm moving, about my feet moving, about my breath, not to hyperventilate, taking deeper breath. So there is elements that are intertwined in them. Right?
Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious to hear. So you did mention, so one of the things with men this day and age, especially if we grew up with, childhood trauma, so and growing up, not having as much trust in the masculine and the feminine roles in our lives, like our parents, as we grow up, then that starts to show up in our life, right? Through our emotional expression, which usually with men is rage, anger, and all these things. And one of the things I wonder that when you start to get into combat sport, you become good at it, you start to learn to express that rage and anger in a healthy manner, right? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, because you're also a man so it's like, because one of the things for me, I'm very well aware that there's a lot of anger and rage still, as I've been processing a lot of childhood trauma these last 4 or 5 years. And I grew up in war in Afghanistan. So between my first 0 to 9 years, I seen a lot of, and I witnessed a lot of things that most people only witness in war movies, right? And when I went to the 10-day silent meditation retreat, they say there's a saying that, a lot of people start meditation to become calm and to become happy, but sometimes meditation opens this can of worms that you weren't ready for, right? Because all of a sudden you calm your body down and it starts to bring up everything that you had suppressed all those years, right? And that's what happened to me. I got out of my 10-day meditation retreat, and for weeks and weeks, I was like crying through my meditations. And because there was a part of me that needed to be expressed, that was never expressed, right? So I'm curious to hear on your thoughts, like, have you found in a way combat sport to be a great way for you to express, let's say, the anger and the rage and all those emotions in a healthy manner?
Yeah, so I've had many students here that came with what I would call anger issues. An anger issue is this topic that we talk about, but we don't really break into what it is, right? Anger is a very positive emotion. Anger is a strong and positive emotion when channeled correctly. If someone breaks my boundaries, then I need anger. I need the anger to help drive me to protect those boundaries. And I think in many, many men, part of the reason they have anger issues is because they had issues with boundaries when they were young, like you said, 0 to 9, right? They felt unable to control their boundaries, or their boundaries were not respected, or no one taught them boundaries. So they created these anger issues as defense mechanism, which is what a lot of us do. That's part of the reason we have this trauma and those emotions stuck in our body. And I find that a lot of men and women, by the way, that come and train with me here, and not a lot, but some of them that come with those anger issues, find first a place to channel that anger. Because a lot of times we have this anger that stems from that childhood trauma or whatever it is, but we don't know what to do with it and why it's there. So at least as a temporary fix, we can at least channel it into a healthier direction. We can channel it to improve our fitness and our health by I'm angry and I'll do more push-ups and I'll work harder. And we can channel it into a drive. I'm angry, so I'm going to train more focused and stuff, which I see. And what these men and women usually gain through the training is, and through that outlet of anger, is a sense of control, is a sense of the anger no longer controls me. I come here, I'm angry, and I'm able to actually use that anger for something positive, and it gives them a little bit sense of control, a little bit sense of being able to hold their boundaries and basically defend them in some ways through the training, and the anger levels diminish over time. That's something that I've seen a lot in training here, and I know through all of my friends that teach combat sports and martial arts and self-defense, I know that it's a thing. It's quite a known thing that people who train martial arts are usually less angry, basically less emotionally unstable in some ways around it, less prone to anger outbursts, and less violent outside in life because they have that outlet. With that, it's not a solution, right? Like putting a Band-Aid on the wound is great, but it's not a solution. Sometimes though, putting that Band-Aid allows that anger and that pain of it to diminish enough that we can do the work. Because when it's so high and it's so alive in your day-to-day life, it's very hard to deal with it. It's very hard not to be angry. And that's an issue that I find with meditation. Sometimes I hear people, oh, you're angry all the time, just sit and meditate, as if that will fix it. But what I find with these people, and they sit and meditate, and all, like you said, all that happens is more anger comes up as they meditate. They're sitting quietly and just getting angry at things. So sometimes having an outlet that reduces the level of that anger, that gets it out of the system, allows us to start doing the real work, which is recognizing the reasons for those anger, healing those traumas, letting go of those emotions. That's something that I've definitely seen a lot in training, and I recommend a lot to people who have anger issues to go and train martial arts, self-defense, combat sports. It's a great outlet and great tool to eventually deal with those problems.
That's interesting. No, that's good. I'm glad you shared that. You mentioned like I talk a lot about childhood trauma on this podcast. You mentioned something that you also realized at some point that you had some kind of traumas or childhood traumas. How are you navigating those, or what have you learned from those? I'm curious to hear on that.
Look, I kind of think that we all have. I have yet met a single person that had the most beautiful, loving life, that didn't leave a single scar on their body. And in a way, I think it's essential. We are yin and yang. We need the dark and the light, the shadow, right? We need it. It's not just bad. It's important and essential for us, for who we are, and it builds who we are. There is no spiritual awakening without going through the mountain, climbing the mountain. I've found I have had a lot of issues. I had anger issues as a child. I had a lot of things. I had various issues that I'm working on these days on. I found that for me, again, the journey of martial arts really helped me channel my anger and become more calm. I had a lot of anger issues when I was younger, outbursts, etc. And getting into martial arts growing up made me calmer and calmer. And I think for me, probably towards 18, 19, I was already quite a calm person. And today, through meditation and through internal work and working with professionals, therapists and stuff, I'm able to recognize, why did I feel those things? Why do I store some of those emotions in the body? Why certain things trigger me? Why I have certain issues in relationships, right? Because we, in some way, we have free will, but in some way we also don't. We are just a byproduct of all of those habits built in us. And I'm trying to these days eliminate and break habits that I feel are not conducive to where I want to be in life. And for that, knowing why you have them is a very good tool. And meditation is a great tool to do that, to recognize why we do what we do, right? And yeah, and this is the journey I'm on these days. I call it a spiritual journey. Sometimes we imagine spiritual journey as like going on a mountain and meditating and seeing God. But sometimes the spiritual journey is sitting alone in your studio and figuring out, why am I fucked up like this?
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
And
no, that's I love that. I love your authenticity and transparency. It's so true. Like a lot of people, I think the word that you used, the spiritual bros earlier, you said, like, where I feel like a lot of people think that it's like being in a mountain and being in nature and, you know, growing a big beard and all that. But it's like, no, the real spiritual journey is, you know, spending the time with yourself, learning about yourself, you know, having a journal, navigating your emotions, wondering why you react this way with your romantic partner. Why do I continue to have these addictions that are not healthy? Why do I drink? Why do I smoke? Why do I watch so much porn? Really, that spiritual journey is that, to become aware of why I do what I do and who am I and who do I think, like, who am I, you know what I mean? So no, that's so true. I like the way you said that. For yourself, you know, like, one of the things I'm glad that we had this conversation is because, like, I'm getting into fighting in a way. Like, I'm looking around this, like, you know, I'm curious because I want to get into it. And one of the things that you mentioned that really hit home for me, it was that, because even myself, I was like, I could go do jujitsu, but if I don't, like, I'm very well aware that whatever I get into, it's not the first class, second class, third class, it's the consistency. So whatever I choose, I must stay with it for at least 2-3 years to build those, you know, I know it takes at least 90 days to start to build a habit. So it will take me at least 90 days, maybe 2 classes a week, 3 classes a week, to just build a habit that I'm used to. Then it will probably take, you know, a while, at least a year or so, where it becomes like just natural to me, to where, like, where I'm able to, for example, like, when you, most of the times you get into like a, you know, you're outside, you're in public and you're at a bar, and, like, let's say all of a sudden 2 guys start a fight with you. Our first reaction is like fight, flight, and like your heartbeat is racing, stuff like that. But I would imagine somebody, even myself, it doesn't happen to me now because of just so much meditation, so much time, that where I am able to not react right away. I am able to just stay calm to stuff, right? So now the next stage for me is that through fighting, because if I'm at a bar and let's say 2-3 guys want to start something with me, and I'm able to stay calm, but like, if I don't have the self-defense tools, like, the calmness is not going to do anything if they start to swing at me, right? And I'm a very good communicator. I can maybe de-escalate the situation. So that's why I'm excited in this journey of now getting a self-defense tool under my belt, that at any scenario where me staying calm doesn't work, I'm not able to de-escalate them with my words. If they do swing, I can protect myself through boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai, Krav Maga, whatever it is that I do, right? So I think it's the habits, you know, it's like, you know, like you said, like, it's like we're a collection of these habits and the thoughts. So it's like, and it's running us, you know. I say at 10 o'clock tonight that I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow morning. 5 a.m. comes, I'm like, you know, so it's like, but if you built the right habit, which I have, 5 a.m. comes, I'm up. I meditate for a half hour and then I'm into the gym, right? And I always look back, I'm like, it's my habits that leads me to living a good life and being healthy and all this stuff like that. If you don't have the habit, if you don't, it's like, it's all habits. Like, we are really like a computer program of habits, but either you have good habits or you have bad habits, you know, like, so the good habits leads to good life, happy, joy, you know, understanding, awareness, all that. And then the bad life leads to addiction, tools that are not serving you, relationships that are not serving you, people that are not serving you, and bad decisions that are not serving you, right? So it's interesting. So for yourself, doing everything that you do you also like work out and cardio, and like, do you do anything else like that as well?
Yeah, so I used to love the gym, you know, hit the gym, lift weights.
Yeah.
But in the recent years, getting older, I understand that my goal of just building strength and looking good is no longer my goal. Now my goal in training is in ways to heal injuries and to bulletproof the body to injuries. Those are my two main goals. And the third goal that probably engulfs them is to be able to move freely through life. So if I want to do a split, to be able to do a split. If I bend to pick something up, I don't crack my back. If I want to jump above something, I'm able to jump. So I'm practicing this thing called movement that we all do, but I'm a bit more conscious of the movement that I do. There are great trainers that I've trained with or under the method, like Ido Portal or Roy Goldschmidt and things like that, or Vanya here with me at the gym. So we train movement. And then as a byproduct, I also feel that I'm getting a bit better looking body, because no matter what you think, I believe that we live in a real world, and looking strong in your body and feeling comfortable in your body is important. How you present yourself, how this vehicle where your soul resides looks, right? And feels. And so I train every day. I try to do something every day. And it's not just something for the sake of something. I'm trying to chase a goal. I want to be able to do a one-arm pull-up. So I'm structuring things. I like to have goals, because otherwise it's so easy to just become a hamster on a hamster wheel. You know, I'm just going to the gym, walking on the treadmill, lifting weights 3 times, and I'm out. I like to work towards something. So I have my regular practices, and of course my technical practices and skill, always trying to get better at boxing, kickboxing, Krav Maga, and always trying to learn new things. I've about a year ago, I've picked up something called contact staff, which is a performance art, a flow art. You spin a stick on your body, things like that. It's a circus art. It gives me a lot of joy, because it's a skill. It's a skill to perfect and work. It's a physical skill. And to do all of those, you need the right energy and the right health. And I think that's where diet comes from. There is Molière, is a writer, and he wrote, I think it's called The Beggar in English, a famous play and a famous book. And in it, he says, a man should eat to live and not live to eat. That is, our food should sustain us, but should not be the reason we do things. It should not do basically what it's doing today, which is be an emotional handicap or crutch or a target for us to do. So I try to eat in ways that sustain my body, that promote longevity and health, and give me energy and recovery from training to the level that I need to. And for me, that involves usually being more animal-based diets. So eating a lot of animal protein, mostly meat, eating some good fruits, some, fermented foods for the gut bacteria, because I believe the gut is a powerful and important thing for the body and the mind. We know now that there's a strong connection between them. So I'm very much about practicality. I want my diet to be practical for what I want to achieve. I want my training to be practical for what I want to achieve. I don't want to do a diet for nothing. I want to have a reason. I don't want to train for nothing. I want to have a reason. I think it helps navigate life as is, having a reason to do things. I want to meditate for a reason. Although again, if you go into the yogis on the mountain, they'll say there is no reason. There's no meaning. And you can buy into it. But even finding no meaning can be a meaning,
Exactly.
So.
No, it's so true. And I love what you said, that everything, I like to have a goal, because I always say, I'm not sure where I heard this, but it was a speech I once watched. The mind is like a GPS, and if in a GPS, you don't put a destination, you kind of just go all over the place. But if you put a destination, at least now you have something that you're working towards. And the point of a goal is not to hit the goal, but it's a good way to know where you're at, right? So for example, I always use money. So it's like, if my goal is to make $100,000 next year, and now I work towards that next year, if I don't hit 100,000, I'm probably much closer to it than I was before, because I put something as a deadline, as a way to point, right? Focus, because energy grows where attention goes. So it's like, I love that, because you want to put your energy towards something. And the mind is like, if you don't give it a goal, it's kind of like, why am I working out? Why am I doing yoga? Why? It's like, it never you might not even stay consistent in anything, because there's no set intention on what you're trying to do. Right. So I love that. What I was going to just mention was, So how important is yoga, do you think? And when I say yoga, I mean flexibility. Like how important is stretching? Because when I started working out, like if I don't stretch right after my workouts or after a couple of days, like it's just like you feel so tight, right? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on now from somebody that does combat sport, how important flexibility and stretching is in your life and in that sport as well.
I love yoga. I've done yoga for a lot of time. I love the spiritual component of it, the focusing on the breath and the moving meditation. And I love the stretching component of it. I do think that these days the westernized version of yoga is lacking. I think we humans are not linear creatures. We move through the world quite differently than how yoga is practiced. And the problem with yoga I find of these days is it gives you flexibility but no strength. And if you have a big range of motion and you're weak in that range, you are actually more prone to injury, I found. So if you're doing yoga and also lifting weights, exercising, strengthening, great. But if your main tool of training of physical activity is yoga, you are increasing the range, you're stretching the ligaments, the tendons, the muscles, and you are not building strength in them. And strength isn't just built by statically holding a pose, which is very common in vinyasa these days. And I feel it's a problem. It's a problem because it's great, it's fun, it's addictive, but it's hugely lacking in giving the human body what it needs. It needs range and strength in that range. It needs range of motion and strength. It needs mobility, my ability to be strong through the whole range. And that's quite lacking, I find, in yoga these days. But if the option is nothing or yoga, definitely yoga. I also find that yoga is an amazing way to tap into spirituality, into the soft arts, because it brings you down. The sessions are very much focused around poses that are in some ways prayers, and it connects you to your breath, which is always a very powerful thing. And it also connects you to a community of people that are doing the same thing, which is also a very strong thing, being surrounded by people who have the same goals. Overall, I'd say yoga is great. Definitely recommend people to try it, but do not make it your one-stop shop. I feel.
No, that's true. I love the way you said that. No, that's perfectly. What I just took away from that was like, if yoga was my only physical activity, then it's like, I'm, like it's not good, but it's like, but I use yoga as just, and stretching is a tool to loosen me up because I work out and I do cardio and I run and soon getting into like a type of combat sport and then just stretching the ligaments and all stuff like that.
And that's of course Western yoga, right? The essence of yoga, all of these poses they do is in the end, it's a warm up to being able to sit and meditate for hours, right? That's where it started. All of those poses in some essence, just so you can sit still.
For 10 days.
For 10 days. That's a journey by itself.
No, that's so true. Well, I just want to say as we finish off the podcast, brother, thank you so much for jumping onto the podcast. Everything that you shared, I'm sure the stories, everything that you shared on this podcast, everyone's going to listen to it. They're going to enjoy this conversation. And as we finish off the podcast, please let everybody know where they can find you, where they can connect with you and all that stuff. And I'm going to enter all that in the detail section of the podcast.
All right. It was a pleasure for me to be here. I'm always happy to talk to other men who are conscious, who are more open-hearted, who are doing the work and trying to share the work, both with people and specifically men. I think there's a dire need for that with men. You can follow me on Instagram, Coach Saar, and you can look at our website for this business if you live in Sydney and you want to come do some boxing, some martial arts, some Krav Maga with me and with my team here in Bondi Junction. We have theboxingacademy.com.au. We also have an Instagram, the Boxing Academy. How do you call the little dash at the bottom, whatever it is?
Underscore. Okay.
Underscore. And but you can find all of that through my Instagram page, Coach Saar. And if anyone has questions, I'm always happy. I have a lot of people send me messages on Instagram, and I'm quite active in replying. And I like replying and getting in conversations with people. So feel free.
Awesome. Sounds good. So yeah, no, I'll definitely enter that stuff in the detail section for anybody that wants to connect, follow Sahar and ask him any questions that, he's a pretty open guy. And lastly, thank you so much for jumping on, brother. It was definitely a pleasure.
Pleasure all mine, Mo. It was great to meet you and talk to you and connect a little bit.
Awesome, man. And I look forward to making it to Australia one day and actually coming and sparring with you and learning something from you. That would be amazing. And as we finish off the podcast, I just want to set some intentions for anyone listening to the podcast that I hope this story inspired you to, get on your own journey of becoming more physically active, learning more about self-defense, understanding awareness, and becoming more confident in your body and in your ability to navigate through life's challenges, whether it's a bar fight, whether it's your emotions, whether it's you cutting an addiction out of your life, whatever it is that you are working towards. I hope the story inspires you to take action. And until next time, stay an aware alpha.